You guys have everybody captivated by the national championship that you guys just won. Seems like the whole state of Vermont is consumed by the victory, which is really exciting to see. It seems like it's been incredible for the soccer community up there, and not only the soccer community, but everybody in the state of Vermont. So first and foremost, congratulations. It's incredible to see the growth of the program. I played at New Hampshire in 2011 and 2012. So to see a program from the American East win a national championship is quite an impressive feat. And I know you played there. And trying to get a little bit more of a perspective than just this season, but to see what you guys did without sharing all your secrets. How does a program like the University of Vermont go from 500 team to a national champion in that like 10 to 12 year period? So I guess share your background. You were a player there, led up to time as a coach. Let's get going from there.
Yeah, so I grew up in Vermont, probably 45 minutes away from campus. And then when I was going into like sixth grade, I might get the timeline wrong here, year to year, but when I was going around sixth grade, I moved right across from the athletic facility. So grew up right there, committed to UVM as a junior, and then, played on the team, was a captain, and then got into coaching. So, coached at UVM for 3.5 years, then went to Cornell, then University of Portland, and then came back to University of Vermont in 2023, like right before preseason, to be the associate coach. And yeah, I mean, it's funny, like in 2008 is when I committed. Team had a really good season, went to the tournament a year or two before that year. I forget the exact dates. And committed. And then in 2009, they only won one game. So that was a little frightening as a committed player. And then my freshman year, our first game was against Stanford at home, Centennial Field in Burlington. I think they were 13th in the country that game. And we won 2-1, overtime goal, I believe, from Nick O'Neill. And yeah, that was, going from that to now here is been a wild ride.
So that time when you committed, could you ever see the University of Vermont winning a national championship at that time period? You have programs in college soccer that have that pedigree where you know what you're stepping into. There's, things obviously have to go right, but there are those programs where you can identify as potential national championship contenders. Mm-hmm. Did you see that in Vermont at the time?
No, I mean, honestly, like it was not, I never even thought about it. When I was going to play there, that wasn't my goal necessarily. I genuinely was not on my radar. Like I was just from Vermont, wanted to play at Vermont, wanted, it to say Vermont across my chest on my uniform. That was something that was really important to me. And yeah, it had nothing to do with like, as I said, I mean, when I committed, they were good. And then the next year they won one game and I was still like, let's go, So yeah. When that's kind of where the program was at for that, it was just 1 year, but yeah, your head isn't like, hey, let's win the national championship next year, Right. And I think a lot of like the process of getting to where we're at now has just been, incremental. Like I would say from 2010 to now has been a really steady, development process. I would say anytime there's development, everyone wants just that smooth trajectory. Obviously it's been a little bit of this, it should look like the stock market to an extent where there are little dips, but you're trending in the right direction every year. And that's what it's been. It's not like we've had one, last year was our standout year for sure, but it's not like that was just like out of nowhere. It's been really incremental, sure. Since I would say 2010.
So you make the run in 2022 was the year, right? It was a good run in the NCAA tournament?
Yeah, Elite 8 in 22, got knocked out by Syracuse at Syracuse, who went on to win the whole thing.
So would you say there's a turning point that you could identify in the program's history? I know you weren't there for 15 years from your time as a player to now as a coach, but can you identify a turning point in the program's history that you would say, okay, now we may have the tools to be a national championship contender?
Yeah, I would say There's been a couple. I would say a really big one was when Brian Wright and Bernard Jaboa were seniors. I want to say that was
Okay.
2016. And, you know, basically Brian that year, I think he had something like 14 goals, 12 assists. Bernard had a good season. They played up top together. They were like best friends for 4 years. We ended up playing Ryder in the NCAA tournament at home. I think we won 5-1. Brian had a hat trick. Next round, we went to Virginia, got a red card and ended up losing late in the game, but felt that we were good enough to beat Virginia on the day. I wasn't coaching that year, but I watched all the games. I was in England that year, but yeah, that was a big season in terms of just like, hey, we can go a little further than we always thought. The year before in 2015, we lost to Boston College in the first round, and we kind of had the goal to get to the tournament. Then the next year, we're like the group really thought they had something special. After that 16 season, that's when Rob, the current head coach, became the head coach. So that then was like, how do we immediately repeat that success? We were pretty good, and we just kept building from there. I would say the next big moment would be 2022. Team had an elite playmaker in Alex Nagy, a guy who had been with the program that was his fifth season. He had a big season. He'd already been drafted, came back for his fifth year, got the team to the Elite Eight. I think we hadn't, I think the team didn't concede a goal for like 8 games. Was playing a very aggressive, like 4-4-2 press, and was just kind of rolling teams over with energy, with intensity, and a lot of quality in a few positions that were key playmakers. And that team believed they were good enough to beat Syracuse on the day, who were the eventual national champions.
Mhm.
Earlier in the season, that team tied Syracuse at home. So it was like, okay, we're in the area we need to be in now. Like, this isn't just talk anymore. Like, we're in the Elite Eight. We're losing by 1 goal to the national champs. We tied them earlier in the year. We're returning a lot of guys. Like, that, I would say, is when the belief was really there. And then there's always that like conversation in the team with outside the team of like, how are we gonna do this again? And that goes down to the team's culture, but also recruiting, and raising expectation levels within each player.
So you mentioned Brian Wright, right? Was the
Mm-hmm.
one that you think you start to feel a shift in the momentum in terms of the quality of player. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
we talked about the lead up to this conversation and getting you on about people answering your phone calls and being able to potentially attract players that when you were a player wouldn't consider a school like Vermont. Um,
Mm-hmm.
you look at a handful of players can turn the tide of a program is one indication that you're sharing about the luck of the draw. And it's something interesting that I learned about during my time at the University of Akron, where Caleb was able to attract a few of the local players that had ties to the area to then have friends of theirs stick around and join the program. And that then parlays into attracting now national talent and now even more so the international talent that you guys have, not only at Vermont but across college soccer at the Division I level. So one curiosity that I have is, what can you share from your experience as a player? What's your coach's name there at the time?
Rob.
No,
Oh, my
Rob.
my coach
Yeah,
was
your coach.
Jesse.
Right.
Jesse Cormier.
So what differences or major differences do you see between Rob and Jesse that makes a massive impact? Because obviously Rob's success at the program speaks volumes based on this past season and then the runs in the seasons leading up to that. What is the main difference between the two coaches?
They're very different people. Very, very different people. Jesse, I think, is an extremely good motivator. I think honestly, Jesse could probably coach any sport. Like, he's just very good with like player relationships, managing the group, making sure everyone's just really competitive, working hard. Um, and that's kind of his thing. And like, he is someone, like, we would always say, like, back in the day, like, our team was just like an army of misfits, and like no one else would be able to coach this group other than Jesse, because guys are like, there was just so much going on with the team of just different characters, just absolute characters. Guys that some guys getting in trouble, some guys are getting 4-0, some guys are partying too much, some guys aren't at all, and just it was just like herding cats at times. It felt like for Jesse, but he could manage it and he did it well, and like yeah, like that was his strength. He's like very good at just like building relationships with players. Very good at it. So I would say that was always his strength. And he would like when he was coaching here at Vermont, like he would let Rob would run the sessions. Before that, we had another assistant, Wade. He's now the head coach at St. Michael's College. But Jesse wouldn't be like running the sessions or doing as much of that. He would just really be like managing the group. Rob, I would say, is like Rob's just like a really smart guy. He's very strategic about everything. He puts people in positions and then empowers them to like elevate their own performance. So whether that's me as the associate coach, hey, like I want you to go find some players, like empowers me to go do that. Doesn't like he helps me, but he doesn't micromanage it. He's like, I trust you. I want you to like go do it. And gives me the freedom to like to do that. Then he also will do the same with players with like he'll give a guy a role as a leader in a position, whatever the case may be, and he'll really like emphasize that like they need to take the reins and like make like drive the team. And he'll have those conversations and people in place all throughout the program that kind of feel like they feel like they're genuinely what they're doing is making a big difference, and that keeps everyone within their roles like super just not everyone's happy in their role, right? But it gives clarity of like, this is where you're at, this is where you're going to get to, this is the process, and just being pretty transparent about all that.
So Rob's been on staff, obviously, a long time as well as an assistant coach, and learned from Jesse or worked under Jesse. How long
Yeah,
did
yeah.
that go for?
So Rob worked at Southern New Hampshire for Mark Hubbard,
Interesting.
and then came to UVM as the assistant coach, and then eventually was promoted to the associate coach under Jesse. So Rob probably came like 2012, 2013, 2013 maybe, somewhere
Okay.
around there. And then was around till 2016, 17. That's when he got the head job.
Gotcha. Okay. So has quite an experience
Yeah,
for
yeah.
about 10 years now as an assistant and as a head coach. That's really interesting to hear the autonomy that's given to not only you, but to the players as well. How did that come about? Again, I know you weren't there from the start of his career as a head coach, but I guess over the time that you have been there, what are some examples that you could share in terms of autonomy that's given to the players? Because I think that's really exciting to hear now. Because I think we're starting to go through a shift where players are getting some more autonomy in the program and leadership, and not that systems are getting too boring and irrelevant. Just like you see with
Mm-hmm.
a little bit with Guardiola right now, seems to be getting caught up in a lot of systematic play, and you get the freedom of some of these players that can make an impact on their system because they've recognized it and they get caught in their ways, and allowing the creativity of the player. What are some examples that you could share from your time there that you've seen?
Yeah, I mean, like it's a huge thing for us to just like our having our players kind of patrol the behavior of the team in the locker room. Like we don't really go into the locker room. The only time we go in the locker room is before a game, or tours with recruits. So like that's an example of like everything in there in terms of the cleanliness, the lack of cleanliness, what the guys are wearing to training. Like we have no input into that. We tell them what we want the standard to be, the older guys, and then it's up to them to manage that. That's one example. Another example might be like, the guys run captain's practice in the summer, and again, like the captains manage that entire process. The older players manage it. We you know what I mean? Like we don't have anything
Sure.
to do with it, but they make sure that, last year, like the captains, like they broke the whole team up, into the different houses they're going to stay in. They manage the training times. They manage it with the strength coaches. Like they do all of that. In terms of like when we bring in new players, especially the international players, it can be like a lot of people talk about how it takes time for the international players to bed into the team. It doesn't with us. Like our guys will pick them up at the airport. They'll take care of them. They'll take them to wherever they need to get their bedding. Like literally go get sheets. Like grocery shop, like they literally hold their hand for the first few weeks to
Sure.
make sure they integrate into the team. Like a lot of the stuff that, back in the day would be like, oh, you got new guys, like make life hard for them. It'll make them mentally tough. Like we don't do that at all. It's like, how can we make these guys feel as at home as possible, as fast as possible? And the older guys have to do that because I can't do that all summer, like that I can't have that role. So there's so many ways, like literally in everything we do, the players have a lot of autonomy to like manage a lot of that stuff. And then we have really kind of strict guidelines on what we're looking for on the field and whenever the team's together. But most of the time they're not around us, right? So it's like how are they managing that, that ecosystem? Like that's the most important thing.
And this wasn't the case when you were a player there, the autonomy.
A little bit, not as much so. And I would just say as well, the types of people we had, like it just didn't work as well if it
Right.
was there, right? Like we weren't as locked in terms of like what we were trying to accomplish. We didn't have the same goals. We didn't have the same, um, just the buy-in wasn't the same.
So, from your understanding, when Rob was announced as the head coach, this is the time that the change started, where the autonomy from the players was dictated essentially from day one. Hey, I want to give you more of the responsibility.
No, it
Or
took
was
time.
there a
Like
lead up
when
in trust,
it
gaining
took, yeah, there
trust?
was a lead up in trust, and it takes time. Like I was here when Rob was the first head coach. I was the director of ops for 2 years, and then I was
Okay.
the assistant.
Okay.
Um, and it's different when, like, I think it's different. Like I think Rob's evolved a lot. I think as you get more confident as a head coach and you get older and more experienced in the role, I think you feel more comfortable giving decision making power to other people, and you become less reliant on yourself to be in the weeds on every little thing. I think that allows him to have a bigger perspective. I wouldn't say it's initially how things were done. I also will say though, like I think the players we have now, like we recruit players with, we like to talk about like intangible talents. That kind of like this works for them. Like how we operate the team works really well for them, and we allow all the guys to be themselves. And we try to like not micromanage too much of that.
Sure. There are a couple points I want to go off from that point that you just made. First, the intangibles that you guys have now at the program. Can you share those when you go through the recruiting process with a player? What are those first things that you speak about when looking at them? And then what gives you the confidence that they have them?
Yeah, I think the first thing is just trying to be like a lot of programs will recruit players through materialistic things. Hey, we have the best field, we have the best locker room, we have the best gear, we have the best, name it. Like it's all materialistic stuff that has nothing to do with player development, has nothing to do with their experience, in my opinion, right? Like I've been
No,
to
I agree.
like programs with phenomenal facilities. It's nice, like it's a good work environment. It has nothing to do with winning, right? It doesn't make you win.
Sure.
So for us, we really are like, hey, like obviously we have everything we need to win a national championship. We're not going to win it because we have the nicest, any of that stuff. Like we have the best people. We're looking for the best people. Nothing really else matters. Like, do we have the best people in this room? And we're very just like transparent about that and authentic about it. And people will click with that if they like it. If they want to be told we have the best field in the country, like, yeah, don't come here. It's all good. Like, you'll find another place with a better field somewhere else. Like it can always happen. There's always a bigger fish in that sense. But like for us, we genuinely just want the best people here that want to compete and win a championship for Vermont. That's flat out what we're looking for. Every single kid you talk to recruiting is going to say, hey, why do you want to go play college soccer? Oh, I want to be a pro. Every single guy, that's their first answer. And I will immediately cut them off and say, like, that's awesome, but we want people here who want to win a national championship for Vermont. Like that's why we want people here. And if we do that, we did this year. We had the two highest draft picks in our team, and we have 4 or 5 other guys on trials, in and around USL, MLS Next Pro currently, right? So it's like through the team, you'll get what you want. But we don't want players that are like, yeah, just like how quick can I be a pro? Like, well, how quick can you help us win? Like that's what we want. We want to win. We want to have a really good experience for our players in terms of just the environment the people they're around. And that's how we recruit. So again, there's nothing wrong with saying anything else, but We want really blue collar guys. We want guys who want to compete every day. We want guys who know we're going to have another starter in their position and they're going to compete against that guy every day. And we're going to be fair and honest with who plays in the game. And we're going to have elite depth and we're going to compete. And that's what we recruit on, if that makes sense.
Sure, sure. At what point in the recruiting process, I guess, what year was it when you were able to start saying, maybe not directly you, but the Vermont staff, hey, we want players that are competing for a national championship, right? Because you said when you were there as a player, wasn't even a thought, competing for a national championship. What year was that when you started to say in the recruiting process, we want guys that are going to help us win a national championship?
Yeah, it was in 2016 was the first time. The
And
first person that I ever heard say it was like discuss it in recruiting was Ruben Resendez, who's now the head coach at Bryant. He went to Franklin Pierce. So Ruben was with us. And yeah, that's when we signed players like Alex Nagy, Joe Morrison. We had a kid, Theo Bear from Vancouver Whitecaps committed who ended up signing pro and with them, and he's top player. So we had a really good group of guys bought into that. A few years later, we went through another kind of recruiting cycle, and we started the same thing again in like 2019-20, really hammering it home. Like we just kind of went through that cycle with some guys that we got, and we had to kind of rebuild the group, and that was the main focus. And we weren't recruiting players at the time that were being told that by the other schools recruiting them. I'll put it that way.
what
Right?
made you
Like
guys believe that was the right time to say, hey, we're going to start competing for a national championship? And what grounds essentially do you have to say that?
Yeah, I mean, you could look back and say we had no right to say that. You know what
Sure,
I mean?
sure.
And a lot of people were like, you guys are complete, like you're just BSing. Like you know what I mean? And that's fine.
You backed it up. It
For
doesn't
us,
matter now.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. For us, I think we saw, as I said, like when we went that game when we played Virginia, and we have a lot of respect for Virginia, right? Virginia's a top program historically, and that year they
Sure.
were good. And we went to their place. We win 5-1 in the first round, which we did this year too at home, same team or a different team, but same conference. Then
Sure.
we went, to Virginia and had that game. I think after that, it was just like, hey, like the margins are not that big. Like, let's be real. Like the margins are very small, and
Yeah.
we think we can do better. Like we haven't maximized what we're doing, and in soccer, I think it's one of the sports where there can be the most upsets, just because there's the least amount of goals. So I think, we just had that belief, and like again, maybe you're saying it to put it out there to try to make people a little more serious about what you're doing, but we believed that we were gonna do it. Like we did. Like it wasn't just like us saying it.
Yeah.
And
Hard to
we
sell.
changed a few things. Yeah, we changed a few things too of like just how we communicate. Like we used to say like Rob talks about this often. Like we used to talk about a lot about like, hey, that's like a pro level pass, or like that's a pro level goal. Like we talk about that in training. Like you see you're in film, like guys, that is pro level. We stopped talking like that. We just started saying like that's national championship level.
Hmm.
And like every day we're just like, what can we give national championship effort today? Like that's like we don't worry about being a pro. Like that's a result late down the road. Like if we aren't winning at a high level, none of us are good enough to get to the next level, right? So like we tried to like change just a lot of like the verbiage we're using, and just again just like every day like we would talk about like even like our non-conference games this year, we'd be like, hey, we need championship effort today, we need national championship effort today, just like really trying to hammer that home. All the guys we had back this year, like they were all locked in on what we were trying to do. There was no one that thought it was impossible.
Mhm.
And moving forward, obviously now we've kind of proven
Sure.
that we can do it. But I think the big thing is like if you talk too much about it, you just lose sight of the moment, right? Like the key
Yep.
is just being at an elite level every day and having really high standards every day. So it's a balancing act of like talking about the end result too much versus, if you don't set that goal, you're not going to get there.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I told our guys like in the NCAA tournament, like before we play a team, I watch all their coaches' interviews. I watch all their players' interviews. Like I try to get inside the head of the opponent and watch all the fit. Like we do our research. And we were, some of the teams we were playing were really good, like elite level teams, very few weaknesses that we could identify. But like, they'd be asked in interviews like, hey, like, how are you, how are you approaching this, season or whatever? And they'd be like, yeah, like, we're just like really happy to be hosting another game. Like our goal is to host an NCAA tournament game this year. And I'd watch that and just be like, guys, like we got them right where we want them. Like, like we're going to travel there. And like, we are not satisfied with traveling here. We're not happy to be here. Like we're here to do a job, and just having that mindset all the time, I think is what you need.
Yeah. No, the reason I asked the question is usually I can imagine a program gets to, let's say, a college cup, and then the following year in their recruiting process starts to say, to guys that they're considering, we're looking for somebody that's going to help us win a national championship. And no, that's why out of the experience that you had there with the program, first college cup was this past season that you got to and won a national championship. So like that lead up, although there were the runs in the NCAA tournament, I was curious to hear what was that turning point to have that belief in your recruiting process to say, hey, we're looking for national championship contenders, so or people that can help. Yeah, I mean, between the addition of a few good players and a really good coach, and the verbiage and the belief in a system goes a long way. I think about the addition of somebody like Rob as a head coach and how a coach can make a massive difference. With my ties to the program, the job at the University of New Hampshire, the job that Mark did to turn that program around, and then to see the impact that he had on a program like NC State and the ACC goes to show you get a good coach in at any program, really anything is possible. And I think that's the one unique thing, like you say, about college soccer in general. Like anybody on any given year can win, and you guys have shown that. I think you can go back and say Marshall's in that same boat now. Similar situation 10 years ago wouldn't see a program like Marshall in the College Cup, and now they're pretty consistent. So with one of my other questions that you brought up, in terms of the landscape of college soccer, what have you seen change the most, during your time as a player, throughout your time as a coach, 10-year period? What's been really stand out for you in that gap?
Yeah, there's so much, man. It's crazy. I think the first one is like, from a coach lens, like the film sharing with tactical cameras is crazy. Just how much that's developed. I started in, when I went to England for a year and did an internship at Crewe Alexandria,
okay,
which was in League Two at the time. So it's a very good youth club, professional club. And I learned how to do like sports coding, live coding, game review, like video analysis, like for the pro level and their academy. So that's kind of a lot of what I was doing over there. So when I came back to the States, I was programs knew about this, obviously, like some teams used it, but I was live coding games in the press box. That was my first gig. So on game day, like I was doing all that type of stuff. So I was live coding. I was doing player clips, every touch of the ball. I was doing all that. What you now download off Y-Scout, I was doing that in-house.
Sure.
Because Y-Scout, like, I don't know if we just didn't buy it, or I don't know what the exact situation was, or if it just wasn't, maybe it was Instat back in the day, whatever. So now just having that like readily available for every team in the country with tactical angles is unbelievable, just in terms of like enhancing the tactical level of the game, enhancing the player development standpoint of like being able to do that for training every day in games and individual film. So I think just like the technology aspect has really advanced the quality that you're seeing on the field. So that would be the first thing. I would say as well, like, MLS Next is now a thing. There was the DA. Like, there's just been a lot of changes in the youth landscape, but I would say it's all trending towards better players in the US.
Sure.
In my opinion, like better youth players. Now, the catch of that is the best youth players now are all going pro. What that has now done, though, it has massively leveled the playing field in college soccer. So what I mean by that, so when I was at Portland, we had, I want to say, the number 2 recruiting class in the country. You know, I then came to Vermont. We had, I think when I was at Portland, we signed 5 players in the 2024 class, all from, 4 were MLS Academy and 1 was playing for a local team in Oregon. I think all 5 of the kids did not go to Portland this year. They all signed professional contracts.
Mm.
So a school like Portland that like they do an unbelievable job with recruiting domestic talent, the best players and U.S. players, a lot of them are going to go there, and other schools too. But Portland does a really good job of that. They're now losing some of those kids late, and it makes it really hard if you're 3 weeks before preseason. Like, hey, how do I replace this guy? That it's pretty hard to do, right? So I think a lot of that, like your traditional top blue blood programs that everyone would bring up, that I'm not going to go through and name here, but like you'd think of, I think their talent pool is a little sketchier now because if they do sign that kid, are they going to end up going pro? Like, are they going to lose them late? Is it so a lot of those really blue chip American kids are now not on the market, which opens the door for international players. It opens the door for ECNL kids, opens the door for the third best kid on that MLS team to now be the best kid. So I think it makes things a little more uncertain for certain programs. So the recruiting landscape has changed a lot. What else? I mean, there's so many things. That would be the
Sure.
main 2, I would say.
Let me touch on a point because it's one of the questions that I wanted to ask a little back ago. But like a lot of programs, we're the same age roughly. When we were in college as players, majority of the roster were domestic players across pretty much all the programs. Right now, they're pretty much international based for the most part. It's completely shifted in a 10-year period, less than 10-year period.
Mm-hmm.
Is that mainly because of the programs and coaches having interest in the international players, in your opinion? Or is it more so, like you just mentioned, the top domestic players deciding to sign professional contracts, whether that's MLS, USL, and bypassing college? Why do you think that shift has taken place in the capacity that it has?
I have a few guesses. I don't know for sure. I think the first one is like, if you want to compete and win at the highest level in Division 1, you have to have players that can compete at that level. And if you can't get them domestic, you have 2 choices. You either say, "Oh, we're just not getting them. We'll just lose this year," or you say, "Where can we get them?"
Sure.
So that's the first thing. So for us, if we're not going to get the kid that is, in and around the U.S. Youth National Team consistently, then we need to find someone who's at that level somewhere in the world, or we're just not going to compete. So that, from a just basic competition standpoint, like that's the first thing. I think the second is a lot of really good Division 1 coaches right now came through the Division 2 schools, certain ones. You can look at Mark Hubbard, Rob Dow, who's here, Chris
Sure.
Grassi.
Yep.
You can go through, you keep going.
Yep.
Division 2, historically, I believe, I could be wrong, I didn't play D2, but I think D2 has consistently had more international players even before that, just due to different eligibility rules.
Sure.
So I think a lot of those coaches are coming from D2 to D1, and they're saying, how can we work within the Division 1 rules, work within the Division 1 landscape, but continue to use a lot of these Division 2 recruiting strategies at this level? Because everyone knows, like, I mean, if the best D1 team plays the best D2 team, like it's going to be a decent game. I don't know, I don't know what the final score will be, but like those teams are good.
Yeah.
The level's very high at the highest end of D2. So I think a lot of those coaches, and then it's a trickle effect of like, you see someone else do it, they're doing well, now we're going to do it, right? So like, I've had plenty of people call me and be like, hey, did you go through these people to talk to these players? Like, we want to try, they're trying to do what we're doing, and that's all good. But I think once you see success, it's kind of a snowball effect, and people try to mimic what you're doing. So if you want to stay at the top, you got to keep evolving. But I think that's a big reason. There's a bunch of other like eligibility reasons, but I don't want to get too in the weeds in that. But like, yeah, I think it's mostly to do with just, if you want to compete, for us, what I would say, you can't sacrifice the level, right? So like if I can find a player in the United States that is at a level, we are going to sign them, no questions asked.
Mhm.
100%. We are always trying to get American players. If you
Sure.
look at our team last year, we had more than 2/3 of our team is American. So a lot of times I'm seeing all this stuff with like the international. It's blown up since the national championship because Marshall's lineup I think was 10 or 11 of the starters were international, and then ours is 50%. So everyone's like, oh, it's 75%. Well,
Yeah.
not on our team. And I also don't consider Canadians as internationals because like we recruit kids from Montreal. It's 70 miles away.
Right.
You know, Sidney Wathuta, our guy, he was playing for Vancouver Whitecaps. Like, is that really an international? He's in the MLS system. So
Mhm.
I would say we had a lot less internationals than people on Twitter, but
Sure.
we'll leave that.
Yeah, percentages get skewed when they don't have the full context like that. So,
And,
um,
and, and as well, like our strikers, like Yanni Bazzini and Maxi Kissel, like they're both dual citizen, like they're U.S. citizens.
mhm.
Everyone says they're national, they're not. They're U.S. citizens.
Yeah.
So there's
Yeah, just
a lot of stuff like that.
sure. I just think with the growth of the domestic player and how improved the whole U.S. soccer development system's been for I think the average player is better than they were when we were coming up. Say the quality
Mm-hmm.
is definitely higher, so that's why the international route is just an interesting one for me with how much the game's improved at the youth level to
Mm-hmm.
still be going overseas. But I see that perspective, and you get one guy or one team that does it, and you have a 21-year-old freshman, and then you see the program, in another right across the road from you, only have a 18-year-old freshman, and you can't keep up with that international guy. You have to make some sort of change. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, but the fact that you bring up some of the top coaches like Rob and Mark and Grassi to have those Division II roots to take some of that experience to the Division I level. So, um, yeah, just a massive shift in 10 years. It just seems like it happened
Mm-hmm.
so quickly. So,
I, I think too, though, I wholeheartedly agree. I also think I think everyone's everyone's doing it their own way, right? Like I think there's plenty of teams, Georgetown, Indiana, Portland, as I said. Like I think there's plenty that go a different route. I think the most important thing is just like with your roster, like putting together a group that can compete, and everyone's going to have a different niche that they go after, and I'm not of the belief that there's a right or a wrong way to do it. I think if you're winning more than you're losing and the guys are happy and they're developing, like you're probably doing it the right way. And if you're losing a lot and guys are unhappy, like you're not doing it the right way, and I leave
sure.
it at that.
Sure. No, I'm in the same boat as you, and I learned that early on. It's hilarious to hear people, or coaches in particular, talk about the right way of playing. The right way of playing is what works for you. It doesn't matter if it's right or
Mm-hmm.
wrong in your eyes. That's the beauty of the subjectivity of the sport. And like we briefly spoke about it leading up to this podcast, the fact that you're not going to be recruiting the same players as maybe an ACC program or a Big Ten program. Like there are enough players out there that fit what you're looking for, and I think that's super important for people to understand. It's not like the top player, let's say in the US, or you name whatever country, Canada, just because you're the national champion means you're going after them. It could not be a fit
Mm-hmm.
for what you're looking for as a program. So I think that's super important for people to hear as well. So yeah, so you were at Portland. What drew you back to Vermont? With obviously you have the ties to the area, but Portland, a nationally ranked program year in and year out, to leave that is quite the move, and obviously shows your belief
Mm-hmm.
in the program that Rob was building.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like when I went to Portland, like I was super excited to be there. It was really hard to leave. I really liked the staff. I really liked the players. I really liked the city. I liked Oregon. It was all great. It was great. But when I was there, like UVM was having had their 2022 season, and I was obviously, Portland was in the Elite Eight that season as well.
Okay.
We lost to Pittsburgh, and then UVM was in the Elite Eight and lost to Syracuse. And yeah, like Rob called me and basically, offered me the associate head coach position. Um, all that. Like I did the whole process, and for me, it was a no brainer in the sense that like I'm coming home. It's where my family's from. It's where my whole entire family lives. Where I played. I grew up here, and I was jealous as an alum and of someone who loves Vermont that they were having so much success and I wasn't a part of it.
Mm,
And I honestly also like really wanted to be the person to come in and like continue the momentum as best as I could. And I felt like I did feel a lot of pressure, honestly, to
sure.
we had to take the next step. I was very clear in that, like, we need to take the next step. Like all the, I'd worked a long time to like get UVM to where that 2022 season was. I wasn't a part of it for that 2 or 3 years, but
Hmm.
a lot of sweat equity had gone into it. And yeah, I was just like, I just want to be, I selfishly want to be a part of that,
Yeah,
like straight
sure,
up.
sure.
And, you know, it brings me significantly more satisfaction to do anything for Vermont than anywhere else. I'll put it that way.
No, I completely understand that. You got back just in time. Got back just in
Exactly.
time.
Exactly.
What do you feel like you implemented during your return that really made an impact to the program?
Good question. Honestly, in 2023, I got back a week before preseason, and I we didn't implement anything new. I told Rob like let's do exactly what you did in 22. Let's try to do it again. The roster was recruited to play that way. The roster is set. Like there were a couple additions that we had late that we did do. So like Sydney Wathuta, we signed. I don't know if you know Sid, but we signed Sid like 2 weeks into the semester. It was a little crazy because we had
Yeah.
an issue with a player and eligibility stuff, but um, he was someone that we were probably going to try to bring in the next year. But um, signing him was a big step. Um, yeah, then going into 24, like in the off season, we trained a lot in terms of just like how we're going to be in possession, how things are going to be different. I'm a really, really big believer in box defending, getting clean sheets, being really organized in the back third. I think if you watch our tournament run, you'll see that.
Yeah.
Um, None of these things are like revolutionary or anything they weren't doing before, but certain ideas of pressing and possession I learned at Cornell and Portland, we definitely implemented into the team. A lot of the recruits we signed, were important pieces, of course. Some of those were through new connections I'd made or just different things that happened. But like I lead our recruiting, so that's obviously a big piece. But yeah, like the foundation of the program didn't change. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? It's as an alum too, like it's really important to me that we always have a style and an ethos about us and energy about us that everyone through the years can look back and kind of be like, they might not play in the same system, but like that's a Vermont team. So like they tackle hard,
Sure. Yeah.
they compete, they'll block a shot with their face,
Yeah.
they're good on set pieces. Like that's a Vermont team, and we
Familiar
have a
with
little
all
more
those.
talent and depth. Yeah, yeah. Like we're never going to change that. Like that's us. That's Vermont. Like whatever community you're in, you should represent your community. Like we're a blue collar community.
Yeah.
We're going to play blue collar soccer with a lot of talent. That's kind of what we've done. But yeah,
What so you got knocked out in the first round of the NCAAs in 2023?
Sweet 16.
Sweet 16. So that step
Yeah.
back, you think helped this year in any capacity? Was there that like incentive to get back to where you were in 2022? Was that talked about at all? How did you approach it that way?
I mean, a little bit. Like honestly, we were like, we need to win the whole thing. Like we would need our goal was to win the treble this year, which we did. So that was the goal. We didn't talk too much about 22. It was just again another year where like we had a really good first round home game, big win. Second round we went to UCF. I think they were ranked number one in the United Soccer Coaches poll going into that game. We beat them on the road, and then we had to go to West Virginia. I don't think this is like very public knowledge, but like going to that game, we had 12 guys that weren't really training. They had the flu,
Mm,
and we just didn't play well enough on the day to win. But we were like right there. Like they scored in a corner with 6 minutes left. We should have scored. Their goalie made an unbelievable save 3 minutes later. So it was another game where like we're right there. I think they were ranked top five at the time.
hmm.
Um, and we were like, we're fighting with what felt like one arm behind our back. Like it was like almost like back in the COVID days where like we couldn't have team meals together and stuff in the whole run up to that game.
Mhm.
And so we felt like, hey, the margins are really, really close. We had 4 or 5 guys that could have left in terms of just eligibility. They were graduating and they had the COVID year, and we kind of just did everything we could to convince them to come back for one more year and cement their legacy as not just a good, hey, we had a good run, into like, hey, we're the best team
Sure.
that's ever been here. So um, yeah, that was kind of you know how we approached it, I suppose.
Yeah, no, it's great. The progress that the program's made, winning the national championship. What have you guys begun to talk about in terms of implementing moving forward? Now you obviously have the national championship in the bank, and there's probably some expectations, more expectations of you. You have the community behind you, the support there, the state of Vermont. How do you continue to make progress and carry that weight with you guys? Have you begun to think about that at all?
Yeah, of course, of course. I would say the first thing is that we have a lot of guys on the team coming back who can compete at a really high level, and what we're telling them is like it's their chance now to cement how elite they are, or they can cement their legacy. I think a lot of people, when you look back at last year's team, we have the 2 players who scored in the national championship returning, but I think if you ask the general public, they would say like, oh, the best players, like these are the guys, because it's just who they know, and they're
Sure.
gone now. But we have a lot of guys coming back who, like, we are trying to almost put a chip on their shoulder that it's like you are underappreciated almost, or like it's your time to step out of the
Mhm.
shadow now a little bit, even though they were key players for us last year. We think they can take a jump. So that's the first thing. And just having that hunger of like we want to become a dynasty now. That's what we're talking about.
Mhm.
And we want to repeat. Like we want to defend our crown. We have the biggest target on our back. Like this is
Sure.
just how we talk to the
Sure.
guys. Um, but then it's also, can we stick to a similar philosophy, right, with our recruiting, with our play style, but also evolve? Like we have to be better. If you win, that does not mean the process that you took to get to winning was perfect, right? So we won everything. We lost 2 games last year. We tied 5 or 6. We should have a perfect season, right? Like that wasn't good enough. We shouldn't lose any games. Like, our process, even for every game we did win, like, can be improved in terms of our training habits, our tactics. Like we're trying to just get better. And if we don't, it's a disservice to our team, to the program, to the community, right? So like that's how we're approaching it. Um, I think every year as well, like your team's slightly different. If you set out to play the exact same way every season, like you're going to get caught out. The game evolves, your team evolves, your players change, your everything changes a little bit in college year to year. So we're going to turn over a quarter to a third of our roster, and the guys that are here right now in the spring are creating an identity that our team's going to carry into the fall. It's not going to be the same as last year, just because of the personality of the group and the technical, tactical skill sets and all of that. So we have to evolve a little bit in terms of our play style. Nothing crazy, but like we just have to find the right solution.
Sure.
We're not going to say we're going to play the exact same way. Like we're going to play the way that this team will be the most successful winning. So
Mhm.
we have to find what that is. That's an active process from coaches and players.
Yeah, no, it's something that during my time at St. Benedict's, keeping players with a chip on their shoulder, keeping them motivated after success is always, the biggest challenge because you've gotten them to a point, and yeah, it's never perfect. But how do you have them in that mindset of going about their business in a more competitive, driven, focused way that
Mm-hmm.
you can continue to carry that weight and expectations? So. Yeah, just super interesting to hear your perspective. What else do you guys have planned, like for the spring as you head into the fall? That's a little bit maybe of a change than you've done in years past to essentially revitalize the team. I know you mentioned you have your core ethos for recruiting. Um, has anything changed in the month and a half, 2 months now since the national championship?
Um, no, I mean, we just have a lot more eyes on us, a lot more engagement, a lot more, uh, you know, media requests, podcast requests. We're going to the
Sure.
state house on Friday, so we're not training on Friday because we're going to go to the state house and get dressed up, and I'm not sure what that's going to be, but we're getting something.
Yeah.
We had a parade. Like, there's been a lot of
Sure.
celebratory things, which are awesome, but we also like, we were saying we're going to look backwards with 10% of our time and 90% we're moving forward. And there obviously, it needs to be a community wide celebration of what we've accomplished, but there is also, we need to stick to what we do. Like, we haven't changed much. We're
Mm.
not going to change, much. We just need to continue to get better. And, when you win the national title, your season extends by like a month, right? So like, and then we were celebrating, and then this and that, and then it seemed like a week later we're back training in the spring, and we were like, hey, should we give the guys a week off, 2 weeks off, like let them, because some guys still are carrying knocks from the final. Like, we had a knee, a little knee tweak, ankle, this type of thing. It's only been a month,
Mm.
but we were like, no, we need to stick to the exact, like, the schedule we've done before. Like, we have guys who, as I said, have a bit of a chip on their shoulder that we want there, and we need to train them, and we need to have them, you know, stepping into a bigger role, right? So like, we're really trying to just maintain our identity through distractions, if you will, right?
Sure. Staying busy, continuing the momentum. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Makes
yeah.
sense. So last thing, college soccer landscape, a lot of talk about potentially some movement there and the cap on roster size. What can you share about, how you guys are going about as a program, which makes things challenging, not being part of, one of those top conferences such as the ACC or Big Ten and all that. What challenges do you guys see, within the next 6, 12, 18 months that also keeps you motivated in a sense?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, honestly, like, there's so much uncertainty. I hear so many rumors. I hear, it's endless.
Sure.
This is going to be a boring answer, but like, for me, I just literally pay it no mind. Like, Rob deals with a lot of that stuff,
Mm,
conversations. He informs me of like, hey, this is what I just heard.
sure.
Um, but like, from my standpoint, like, my only job is to train the team and recruit the best players I can find, right? So like, and mentor our guys and whatever, and develop them. But like, I'm very good at having a super tight lens. There's gonna be changes, and like, it's not going to change what we're trying to do at all. It's not going to change my goals in life, right? Like, I
Mm,
think, the only thing that matters to me is that if there's a new league that is like I don't know what you'd call it, but like
Super
the
League.
US Soccer League, Super League, yeah,
Mm,
whatever, right? Like, if US Soccer is overseeing stuff, like, that's cool with me. They know more about soccer probably than the NCAA. If I had to throw, you know, my
sure.
hand in one direction, I'd go with US Soccer a little bit in
Mm,
terms of soccer. Um, but I just hope that they allow anyone who wants to participate, as long as maybe there's like, hey, you have to have a stadium with a capacity over 500, like basic, you have to have lights, like, just, basic kind
sure.
of infrastructure stuff that maintains like a quality product. As long as people are meeting whatever metrics they want, you have to have a certain amount of scholarships, whatever. Um, I just hope that they allow everyone to participate and compete, because, as we've shown, like, we're able to sit at that table.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll have the backing
Uh,
of the state of Vermont as well
yeah,
with your success, right?
yeah.
Any
I
favors
I,
that
th- I
needed.
think too. Yeah, I think too. Like, probably to give you a little bit more of an answer. We are in favor of a 9 month season, right? Of something that extends that, like, breaks between games. I think from a player welfare standpoint, like, the fact that you can, like, roll your ankle and miss half the season is crazy, right? Like,
Well, it's something that
and
I don't understand why everybody. I know there's NCAA restrictions, right? But there are still coaches that aren't in favor of a 9-month season. Still. right?
Yeah.
Which is mind
I
blowing.
don't know. Yeah, I don't know where. I mean, I could guess where that comes from, but I don't want to be.
You don't want to do the work.
I don't want to say what I'm thinking. Yeah,
Okay.
like I don't know. I don't know. I honestly think, from my standpoint, from a lifestyle standpoint, it would be 10 times better. 10 times better. Like, yeah, that's my personal opinion
You're
of
not
just like
loading
my
everything
work life
into
balance.
3 months.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, 100%, 100%. That's how I feel. Again, could be wrong. I don't know everything, but
I'm in the
I
same boat.
also think, just from an experience standpoint, like having a normal Saturday to Saturday periodization schedule would just really benefit, again, player welfare, also the academic experience. Like, like you wouldn't miss as many classes. That's kind of important.
Yeah.
I just think I think in every single way, I think the only downsides is teams that share facilities with, let's say, lacrosse and soccer,
Sure.
and the training staff, the trainers, right?
Yep.
So if you have our trainer works with two teams, one in fall, one in spring. She still helps us in the spring, but she's
Sure.
travels with
Focused.
that
Yep.
other team. Yeah, so like those are the only two arguments that I
Hmm.
am like, fair enough, like that we can work through this.
Yeah. You would think. You
So
would
that's
hope.
where I land on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's a deeper conversation with so much that goes into it. So,
It seems to me like 2026, something's happening. That's what it
sure.
seems like.
I've talked to friends in the MLS that say they're making their shift to align more with the European model and
Hmm.
all that, and it just seems with the growth of the sport in the US, like, oh, not to knock anybody, somebody got it wrong, you can decide who, but it's a 9 month season
Yeah.
at the end of the day, and
Hmm.
trying to play catch up and align themselves with the rest of the world, and makes sense to do it during 2026 when the World Cup is here. So,
I, I think too that like soccer is like the world's game, right? Like, I'm not, this is known. The game of soccer is going to continue growing in the United States. The World Cup is going to make it explode even more, but like it's going to keep going as demographics change in the US, as the game like it's just going to grow. It's
sure.
an unstoppable wave. So like the quicker that people can get on board with that, the smarter they'll look in 10 years, because like
Correct.
it's not stopping.
Yeah.
Other sports are going to wane, youth participation will drop, other things will get in flux. Like soccer's not going anywhere. It is going to explode. You know what I mean? So like, again, I just think I would get in at the ground floor if I was, someone who had decision making power.
Sure. Sure. Well, between University of Vermont Green, soccer is definitely trending upward in the state of Vermont. So, what's next? What's next for Vermont in terms of the soccer landscape? What are you guys doing?
I don't know, man. I don't know. I know that Vermont Green has some women's stuff in plans, which is awesome. We're just going to keep doing what we're doing. I think, the ultimate goal in all of this for me, is obviously to represent the University of Vermont super well. Um, but in a more big picture standpoint, is to continue to grow the game in Vermont and have, kind of like, as best as we can, a little hotbed of soccer up here. So that's been really exciting with the USL2 stuff. On the men's, the women had one exhibition game last year. I think they sold almost 3,000 tickets for a one-off game. So like there's an appetite up here. There's a big appetite for soccer, and it's again, that's what brought me back, and it's um, I couldn't be more excited to be a part of it.
Yeah, well, Vermont soccer is definitely on the map. I'm sure you're proud of it. Seen a lot of change in 10, 15 years. You wouldn't consider Vermont a hotbed of soccer, but it's definitely trending in that direction with the national championship and USL2 program up there. And I'm sure the youth scene is only going to be even more motivated by your national championship there. So, yeah, appreciate you coming on and sharing your insight on the lead up to what got you guys to a national championship. So yeah, all the best moving forward with not only the university but growing the sport in Vermont.
Awesome. Thanks, Clint. I appreciate it.